I remember that morning like it was yesterday. I had dashed off to work early, still half asleep. When my phone buzzed, it was my husband, freshly woken up and already texting about how nervous he was for a job interview he had later that day. Amidst the nerves, he mentioned a nagging pain in his leg that just wouldn't let up. Not long after, he sent another message saying he was heading out to grab some pain relief from the pharmacy. The simplicity of that plan didn't hint at anything amiss. It was just another day, or so it seemed. A couple of hours later, during my break, I tried calling him to check if he'd made it back from the pharmacy. There was no answer. I called again and again. It was unlike him to not pick up. I couldn't shake the worry, so I decided to head out early from work. I jumped into my car, still dialing his number in hopes of hearing his voice. As I drove, I kept trying, until finally someone picked up. "Hey babe, where are you?" I asked, a mix of relief and anxiety in my voice, but the response froze me in my tracks. There was a brief silence. Then a woman's voice replied, but it wasn't him. My heart skipped a beat, and chills ran down my spine. The woman on the other end said she was with the sheriff's department. Confused and starting to panic, I pressed her, trying to figure out how she ended up with my husband's phone. But she was tight-lipped, giving nothing away. All she said was, "You need to come home as soon as possible." Her tone was urgent, almost stern, which did nothing to calm the storm of worry brewing inside me. As soon as I pulled up to the house, my heart sank even further. There was a large white van parked out front that I didn't recognize at first. The same woman who had answered my husband's phone was there to meet me. She positioned herself in a way that blocked me from entering the house, her expression grave. Then she broke the news. My husband had made it home from the pharmacy, but soon after, he suffered a heart attack. It was our neighbors who heard his cries for help through the locked front door. They tried to assist him, but there was no getting in. The house was completely secured. Tragically, he went silent before help could arrive. The whole scene felt surreal, as if time had stopped, and all I could hear was the echo of her words and the unanswered cries I imagined in my mind. The suddenness of his death left me reeling. Nothing could have prepared me for the shock. I took several days off work, seeking refuge at my parents' house to try and gather myself. After a week, I knew I had to return home, but stepping back into our house felt surreal. I'd never been alone in that space before. It had always been filled with his presence, but now the silence was overwhelming. It was a tough reality to face, but I knew I had to start getting used to it. The first few days back in the house were eerie, to say the least. I can't quite explain it, but I constantly felt like someone was watching me. It was this unnerving sensation that I wasn't alone. I'd hear noises from other rooms, bumps, creaks, the kind of sounds that shouldn't be there. Every time I mustered the courage to check, the moment I stepped in, everything would fall silent. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. Was it just the jitters of living alone for the first time? I didn't mention it to anyone. It seemed too bizarre, too unfounded. But then, one night, something happened that truly shook me to the core. I was deep in sleep when a noise jolted me awake. You know that fuzzy state, right between dreaming and waking, where everything feels a bit off. That's where I was. I could sense the presence of someone in the room, the almost imperceptible brush of air as if someone were pacing back and forth near my bed. I tried to convince myself it was just a dream, fervently hoping that nothing of it was real. But the feeling was overpowering, and my heart pounded against my chest like it was trying to break free. Gathering every ounce of courage, I forced my eyes open. For a fleeting second, I saw the silhouette of a man, and then it vanished into thin air. I screamed at the top of my lungs, pure instinct taking over as I bolted from the house. I didn't stop until I was safely locked inside my car. There I sat, staring at the dark windows of the house, too scared to go back inside. I drove a few blocks away, my mind racing and heart still pounding, before I managed to call 911. I told them someone had broken into my house. The police arrived within minutes, which felt like hours as I waited, shaken and scared. They went through the house thoroughly, checking every possible entry point, but they found nothing. No signs of forced entry, nothing out of place. The officers suggested maybe I had been dreaming, a suggestion that was supposed to be reassuring, I guess. But everything I'd felt and seen was vivid, intensely real to me. Deciding I couldn't spend another moment in that house alone, I drove straight to my parents' house to spend the night. When I arrived, I spilled everything to my mom. She listened intently, nodding as if she understood more than I could have guessed. Without hesitation, she suggested it was paranormal and mentioned she knew someone who could help. Her friend, a psychic, was called over the next day. I recounted the eerie events, expecting surprise or disbelief, but she took it all in stride as if my experience was just another story in her extensive catalog. Then she gave her response, and the way he delivered it, with a calm certainty, sent chills down my spine. She mentioned several things throughout her reading, but one point struck me harder than the rest. She said that my husband was in a transitional stage where his soul was reliving his entire life, a process she described as common for those who pass suddenly and are not aware they've died. This was apparently the case with my husband. She explained that it was now up to me to help him move on. Her instructions were specific: light candles every night as a beacon to guide his spirit towards peace. Although I was skeptical, but I was also desperate for any semblance of peace. I mustered all the courage I had left and returned to my house, determined to follow the psychic's advice. Each night, I carefully set up candles, their flames flickering gently in the quiet of my home, hoping they would serve as a guide for my husband's spirit. For the first few nights, nothing happened, and I felt a mix of relief and disappointment. Relief that my evenings were uneventful, and disappointment that perhaps this wasn't working at all. But then, one night, everything changed. I had just drifted off to sleep when I suddenly felt an overwhelming heaviness pinning me down. It felt like sleep paralysis, that terrifying state where you're awake but can't move. Along with the paralysis came a familiar sensation, the unmistakable feeling of someone else in the room. Panic surged through me, but I couldn't move at all. After what felt like an eternity, I managed to pry my eyes open, and there he was. My husband was sitting on a chair right in front of me, as vivid and real as he had been in life. His appearance was so clear, so detailed, it was as if no boundary existed between life and death at that moment. Before I could gather my thoughts to speak, he started talking about his nerves for the phone interview, the one he was supposed to have the day he passed, and he was looking for my help to prepare. My eyes filled with tears as I watched him, the pain of reality cutting through me. As he noticed my distress, he began to ask repeatedly what was wrong. With a heavy heart, I had to tell him the truth that seemed to have bypassed his awareness. "Baby, I'm so sorry," I started, my voice breaking. "Do you remember the pain you had in your leg? You had blood clots. One made its way to your heart. You aren't going to make it to the interview, baby. You died." The words felt surreal even as they left my mouth. The look on his face as he processed this information was heart-wrenching. There was a long moment of confusion that slowly morphed into realization, a mixture of disbelief and acceptance crossing his features. I apologized again, the words tumbling out amid sobs. "I love you," I told him, pleading for him to say something, anything. But he just sat there, his expression frozen into that strange, distant look. I immediately woke up, snapping back to reality with a start. The chair in front of me was empty, just an ordinary piece of furniture again. Tears streamed down my face. I couldn't pinpoint exactly why I was crying, whether it was from relief, grief, or a mix of both. It felt like another goodbye, a final one, echoing the painful farewells of his funeral. Do our loved ones ever really leave us, or do they stay nestled in the shadows of our hearts, guiding us silently towards the light?